Before the invention of electricity, criminal acts were hidden by darkness. Police officers carried special lanterns as they pursued suspects. Today, craftsmen replicate these lanterns for the movie and television industries. These props are authentically replicated pieces of police history. With a thick bullseye lens to magnify the light from the flame, the 19th century police lantern helped find bad guys on shadowy streets. To replicate a vintage police lantern, the craftsman starts with a piece of steel. Using a scribe, he traces around a pattern to transfer the outline to the blank. He marks notches for hinges and for the latch and etches the shape of the lens hole in the center. He draws two diagonal lines in the lens hole area. The point where the lines intersect determines the exact center. He punches a divot into the steel at this cross point. He scribes lines along the edges for bending into a reinforced border later on. He cuts out the hinge and latch notches, following the transferred pattern lines. Next, he aligns the center divot with a punch, and then activates the punch to cut out the hole for the lantern lens. The craftsman now bends wire to match the profile of the lantern door. He aligns the wire with the scribed lines on the edge of the door and folds the metal over it. Bending the door to the correct curvature completes the part. Following another pattern, the craftsman marks the location for vent holes in the blank that will become the lantern's main structure. He cuts out the vent holes where he's made the marks using a hand-operated punch. He then rolls the blank into a cylinder. It takes a couple of passes to achieve the correct curvature. Moving on to the lantern's lens holder, the craftsman crimps a bead around one end. This bead helps to retain the bullseye lens in the holder. Returning to the lantern body, he hammers the top rim around the cap. He preps the surface for soldering with a chemical cleaning agent known as flux. He then solders the joint to secure the top to the lantern. He also solders a raised panel to the back. This substantial panel serves as support for handles. He then cleans the solder joints with acetone. Next, he wraps metal hinges around the wire that runs through the notches in the door. He crimps the hinges together at the ends and positions the door on the lantern body. He adjusts the hinges so the ends sit level on the lantern. He solders the hinges to the steel structure. The craftsman inserts the bullseye lens assembly into the hole in the center of the lantern door, and he solders the joint. He pins and solders the two tiers of a copper chimney. He places the chimney over the hole in the top of the lantern and tucks more pins into holes in the chimney. The craftsman installs a decorative part in the top, one that won't obstruct the chimney hole. He assembles the handles to the raised panel at the back of the lantern. Once the soldered seam hardens, he files it down. The craftsman tests the latch on the door and confirms that it operates perfectly. After taping up the lens and handles, he spray paints the lantern black. Now it's time to assemble the oil burning mechanism. First, the craftsman melts solder onto a threaded brass collar and transfers it to the oil tank. He reheats the solder to melt it into the joint. He inserts the wick in the tank and screws the burner to the collar. And that completes the lantern's light source. This replica police lantern will be a working prop designed to shine on TV and the movies.